All right. Well, hey, Professor, I hope everything is well. We're here to present to you Milestone 2 for the website hardening project. My name's Andrew Ross Dunsire, go by Ross. We're going to jump in here, and you've met our team before, so we won't do the introductions like last time. We'll keep it kind of short for sake of time, especially since my team's crashed, but that's okay. So moving forward, Hayden, if you want to start us off with the project summary and then move on.
Absolutely. I'm Hayden once again, and I'm covering our project summary. This pretty much just showcases what our primary deliverables were for this milestone, and then a little status bar on the right showing that we completed each of them. That's our firewall, our IDS, our access controls, and our network monitoring, as well as the system updates. From here, we're going to move into our project updates, and first section covers our wrap up for phase 1, getting into our gearing up for phase 2. The main thing we wanted to focus on was highlighting our feedback, going over that, discussing as a team, and then getting started immediately on implementing our technical plan. And then we had brief discussions about what our strategy was going to be for phase 3, primarily to use that to influence how we'd like to approach phase 2, what other teams might be thinking when they're coming after our server. And then from there, moving into week 4, the first main week of Milestone 2, we addressed those issues in our sponsor feedback, and Siobhan's going to go in depth a little bit more about that later, so I'll let her cover that. And then we also researched our pen testing tools, and those are primarily going to be Nagios, Wireshark, and Nmap. And then from there, I'm going to talk about week 5. This is when we really started prioritizing our vulnerabilities. We finalized our deliverable dates, nailed down pretty much which team member is going to focus on what for the rest of the milestone. And
Let's
then,
pause. Let's pause for a second, Hayden. Looks like
yeah.
Donald has a question.
Oh, sorry about that.
You dropped out just for a moment when you were mentioning the tools. Could you repeat the tools, please, that you're going to use?
Yes, apologies about that. So the pen testing tools that we're planning on using is going to be Nagios, Wireshark, and Nmap. And then I believe Danny is going to discuss a little bit more in depth later on.
Mm-hmm.
Apologies for the issue there, but going back into week 5, like I said, we were prioritizing our vulnerabilities and then implementing our server updates. And then like the big thing that we really started diving into with this is like Ross covered, or Ross, I apologize, Ross is going to cover is our issues with Red Hat, and we had some back and forth with IT, but that we ultimately took care of. But from there, I'll move into the latter portion, getting ready for this presentation and finalizing our report. We completed our server updates. We realized our subscription issue with Red Hat, and we'll move on from there.
Yeah, various things, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
we pretty much go in depth about all of this later on. And for here, last thing I want to talk about is our challenges encountered. And much of this is the same from Milestone 1. All of our team members have full-time careers. We're all full-time students. None of that changed. But the big thing, like I previously mentioned, was the Red Hat subscription issue that it took us a long time to really nail that down. That was our strongest issue that really took a lot to overcome. But aside from that, we had multiple group members come down with sickness, even COVID. We had group members in and out of the country. We had a group member have a baby during this, some of the critical time. We've had group members go through career changes, but despite all of our challenges, we're very confident with the progress we made during Milestone 2. And with that, I'm going to toss it to Siobhan. She's going to highlight how we implemented the project feedback.
Thanks, Hayden. As far as our feedback implementation here, I'll talk some about our showcase website. I've been working pretty closely with that through Milestone 1 and up into Milestone 2. We took some time to evaluate our feedback from Milestone 1 and felt it really branched into 2 main areas, and that was incorporating space for our video archive and improving our responsiveness. To that end, we updated the website to include a video bank that holds our presentation videos, but we also wanted to keep in mind that responsiveness issue that was brought up. So those videos are embedded from YouTube rather than downloaded directly to the Wix website. Also, in reviewing our responsiveness, we did some editing to our mobile version, all in all trying to target that responsiveness time and improving our speed. So we've been doing our speed testing as well bringing up that time for both our mobile and our desktop version. And now I'll hand the reins over to Ross to discuss some of our server configurations.
Yeah. And we started off this course, right, in this project saying website hardening. And turns out when you're trying to harden a website, really you're trying to reconfigure your server because there's a lot that has to be changes. It becomes server reconfiguration more than just tightening down some things. So we started off some users and credentials, right? There was one way to get into the server, which was root admin and a root password. So the first thing we did is I changed the password, inherently revoking everyone's access who previously had the password. So I changed the root password and I only kept it myself as the team lead. And then I created usernames and passwords for everyone else. And if anyone needed pseudo privileges, they were added to a group momentarily or worked with me one-on-one and then removed from that group altogether, just for the sake of keeping root user privilege kind of locked down. We're considering putting in the passwords manager in the future. We didn't put one in at this time. That will enforce a password rotation of every 90 days. We know we talked about a minimum rotation of 180. And then we also looked at Keycloak for looking at like an open source IDP, so we don't actually have to keep up with usernames and passwords in the future. Nothing at this point. We've got 5 for now. So if we have something, it's nice to know that there are options, right? So jumping into Red Hat, this by far was the most confusing error. Looking back on it, knowing what I know now, is a pretty quick, simple fix. But we kept bashing our heads around it, not really understanding that the issue was an issue. I know we pinged IT for the yum install commands initially. IT came back and said this is something they can't fix. So we just thought, hey, it's broken. We got to figure out another way to get around it. And every time we went around it, we just kind of spinning our wheels, not really doing much. So we all collaborated. We jumped on multiple calls, figured out that, hey, maybe it's a subscription thing, right? So I ended up actually finding a couple commands to clean the subscription manager and revoke the ID from the previous management ID. I don't know who it was, probably someone at Kennesaw, but it was no longer under management, right? So then I registered to a group 3 account. So I went on Red Hat, created an account for us, was able to sync that Red Hat instance or virtual machine to the account, which actually is a really cool feature. When you go on Red Hat and you log in, you can actually pull up your virtual machine, see the IP address. You can see what's been downloaded on there. You can see RAM space, like memories, speed, how many core processors, what type. So it's an Intel processor, some really cool information. What's really nice though, and I highlighted here in some nice scribble fashion, it'll show you that what all repositories have been downloaded to there under Red Hat. It's got like over 1,500, but it will actually also, if you subscribe to them, will give you updates for any patch or software updates needed. So for patch management, it's actually pretty nice, considering that the open source operating system is going to give you a heads up, right? So pretty nice. From there, once we figured out the Red Hat issue, this will come up a lot, right? So Apache was then updated after Yumkin was actually working, right? So updated to 2.4.37. So Apache is now updated and patched. PHP, we brought it up to 8.2. So updated that, had to configure a couple files at the same time, right? And then the same thing with MariaDB. A couple things there. We had a GPG key error, so we had to input those, which seems like a kind of like an encryption package, like it's wanting to validate the software before you actually download it. So we had to manually first we tried to get around it, and that bit us in the butt when trying to download other things. So we actually, with thanks to Hayden, he actually manually put in those keys. So shout out Hayden for helping us with getting that up, because it also helped us with MariaDB at the same time. And then ultimately we updated everything that we could. Python's, all the Python languages were updated. Google Chrome, and then the other portions of MariaDB at the same time. All right, so Siobhan, I'm gonna pass it back over to you for SE Linux.
Okay, thanks, Ross. And for our access control, we're using SE Linux. This is working through the use of a multi-level security policy. It has our objects set for user security clearance on those objects, and security level is assigned to those specific objects. So while it's enforcing, which it's set to now on our server, SE Linux won't allow access to any objects without the proper clearance level. So that's our access control. For our firewall, I'll turn it over to Danny to talk about IP tables.
Thank you, Siobhan. So for our firewall, we chose to use IP tables to configure it. IP tables is used to control network traffic by creating firewall rules to eliminate malicious activity and unauthorized access. IP tables allowed us to whitelist certain IP addresses that are allowed to access the server. We started by adding a rule that dropped connections that were not from any of the authorized group members. And this was done by applying our assigned global protect IP addresses to a rule on IP tables. Once our IP addresses were added, we also added a rule that whitelisted the Akwaba website as well. Overall, IP tables will allow us to block unwanted traffic, improve the server's performance, reduce network congestion, and limit the connections to the server to reduce the risk of denial of service attacks. And at this time, I'm going to pass it over to George, who's going to tell you about Snort.
Thank you, Danny. Going over what
second.
we.
Quick question, Shiaban. What was the name of the tool that you were SE Linux?
Yes.
That's what I needed. I'm sorry, I was just taking notes here and I missed that one. Great. Okay, I'm sorry. Please continue.
Okay, perfect. So initially, when we were installing Snort, we had an issue where we couldn't get it to install and unzip it. But once we had fixed the Red Hat issue, it went smoothly from there. We had the rules designed to detect various types of network attacks, including malware infections, DDoS attacks, SQL injections, and other malicious activities. The most important setting that was configured was our HomeNet rules. The first set of the default HomeNet rule processors were pre-processors is the original external network rule. This rule was used to specify which IP address or network should be ignored by the system. The second set was going in and controlling the traffic between the local network. The rules were specified, making it so that certains were allowed and certains were blocked between the different local networks. Alternatively, we can add a rule to allow certain types of traffic between the networks, such as HTTP and FTP traffic. The third set of rules that we had to implement was the control of the external networks in the local network. This rule specified how traffic should be allowed or blocked in the coming of an external network. After that, our priority was making sure that we could access the logs of what traffic was happening. Most of our default rules were organized in various categories such as attack detection, protocol detection, and policy enforcement. The categories help us quickly identify the types of attacks that are being detected. The rules themselves are written in a simple syntax, and we can modify if needed. In the event that we catch unwarranted traffic, we can also create additional rules to supplement that and replace with other default rules. We're going to regularly update and fine-tune our rules to ensure that Snort is providing an optimal protection for our network and server. With that, I'm going to pass it on to Hayden.
Thanks for that transition, George. I'd like to cover our Nagios installation and configuration. So to get started with this, well, I'm not going to cover it here, but there's a lot of troubleshooting involved with setting up the Nagios, or I'll cover a little bit, but Ross already hit the nail home with that subscription error. That was really stopping us. We could not really even get started with downloading the prerequisites to get Nagios running without fixing that. But once we got that taken care of, we installed the Yum security update as outlined on the Red Hat site. We realized that just a generalized update would be downloading a lot of extra stuff that we weren't really needing. Like I believe it was like 55 megabytes, knocked it down to like 4 by only downloading the security. And then that's when we ran into the GPG key error, but we bypassed that. We found the specific keys we needed online, downloaded those. Moving into the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about like from there, once we had that set up, had to go through the same thing again with the Yum install, get that going, and then the commands to install Nagios. Sorry. And from there, we had to extract the download, compile it, install.
Sorry.
No, you're all good. We had to create a user and a group ID that would allow us to log into our server's website. From there, we'd be able to scan all the activity. We can set up notifications and just kind of have full live access of what's going on. After we had that set up, like the user and group setup, we had to install the Nagios plugins, which gave us a little bit more control and configuration power over it. And from there, had some issues getting it running, so I realized that we needed to install some edits to the config file to allow it to bypass SE Linux as well as Apache. But once we got that taken care of, The final issue we ran into was it kept failing, even though everything seemed to be correct. Through troubleshooting the logs, we realized that there was already a corrupted, outdated version of Nagios that was attempting to run at the same time as the successful one. So from there, we pretty much had to do a complete removal of all Nagios, go through all the files on the server, and then do a complete reinstall from back to the step one of this. From here, I'm going to pass it back to George. He's going to tell you a little bit about our config and how we're going to use the website, the Nagios website, for monitoring.
Thank you, Hayden. Pretty briefly, Nagios, among many valuable monitoring aspects provided by Nagios, is the capability for extensive event logs and real-time notification, allowing us to allowing for quick mitigation. So we would basically log in here and we can basically have all the real-time response of what we need to do and what we can do. A network mapper, Nmap, brings the ability to scan for open ports, rogue devices connected to our networks, and other potential vulnerabilities. As you see here, it gives an example of what's connected to our server. And with that, I'm going to, this should be another slide. Thank you. Wireshark, packet protocol analyzer. Wireshark is an industry essential tool for network traffic analysis. So with this, we're basically going to see all our traffic. Just keep an eye on that, and we're going to have another software to monitor that for us. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Danny for the Nmap.
No, we covered it. You're
Oh,
good.
we already did. Okay, perfect,
Yeah.
perfect.
You took your slide. It's all good.
Gotcha.
All right. No worries. So Gantt charts next. I'm frustrated because your direct feedback was to put percentages on there, and I put the time and effort to come through and put percentages on there. And then when I printed it out, it didn't include my column. So I wanted to pull it up and show you real time. And then maybe next time I'll learn how to print it in the right way. So let me pull up in my file explorer here real quick. I've got on the side panel real quick. Just going through this, probably one fast. And then should be right here. So pulling it up. So Microsoft Project's loading. So then you can see it will load. Let me scan over. Come on. Come on. Oh, that's not the right one. No, this has like half the stuff. Hold on. Let's hope it didn't get deleted when I restarted my computer. Well, anyways, I'll pull that up. In the meantime, I think we should move to some questions or anything you'd like to ask as I pull this up and show you the percentages.
Okay.
Donald.
All right, thank you. So good presentation, folks. Congratulations on getting to milestone 2 completed. Yeah, it sounds like you were just hammering against Red Hat for a bit of time, then all of a sudden, boom, y'all got actually the rocket launched, and you got it going and everything. That was like the linchpin that was holding everything back. So